Evolutionary history helps explain our innate connection to social bonding, our love of certain four-legged animals, our need for salty and fatty foods, and plenty more besides. I believe that type of zoomed way out, deep time perspective can also provide guidance on how to build better buildings today for the generations to follow. I believe those responsible for our built environment can, in other words, make targeted design decisions informed by evolutionary psychology and anthropology to ensure cross-generational karma. Now, essentially, this is how I feed my hero complex. I help residential developers, offices, workplaces, hotels, and resorts to create places and spaces that are healthy for people and for planet. And right now, in addition to priority number one, which is decarbonization, that also means addressing certain social and human aspects as well from our buildings, with things like the type of materials that we allow into our interior spaces. It's the quality of the indoor air that we breathe. It's a connection with nature even whilst we're indoors. It's creating spaces that promote physical activity and mental well-being. And no matter where we are on the evolutionary timeline, you'll notice that there are those of us who feel drawn to preparing food, raising children, passing on accumulated wisdom, and some, like me, feel a gravitational pull towards the physical structures that we inherit, build, and ultimately leave behind. And so, now that I have you gathered around effectively a large format campfire, let me tell you our story. And we begin with the materials that go in to our buildings and interiors, because if we get that bit wrong, we risk resource depletion and environmental damage, even before the first foundation is laid. That means less cement in our concrete. It means less fossil fuel-based plastics going into our floorings and paints. It means generally more sustainably sourced timber, wood, as well as bio-based natural materials that are locally sourced. That's the planetary side. On the human health side, we're also still playing whack-a-mole with a plethora of toxic chemicals of concern that quietly crept into our buildings after the 19th century's chemical revolution. You'll recognize some of these: lead, asbestos, formaldehyde, but also flame retardants, antimicrobials, and nasty off-gases known as volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. Essentially, these are things found in low-grade piping, flooring, insulation, finishes, furniture, that represent what amounts to a toxic inheritance passed on to us inadvertently by previous generations. If allowed to accumulate indoors, they can collectively amount to causes for cancer, hormone disruption. They have links to respiratory problems and cognitive dysfunction. So the stakes are really quite high. What can I do in my role to prevent that happening again, to break the link in the chain so that it's not happening with our new buildings and our new refurbishments? Well, a first cut of a materials list when I'm presented with one on a project is to use the great-great-grandparent test. So I'm thinking, would they have recognized a material? If not, I know I need to push deeper and dig for more information. Ask the manufacturer for a product declaration. It's basically like an ingredient list for building materials. And from that, I can get some sense of whether there's any risk in there for human or planetary health. Going a level deeper, we have a life cycle analysis, where we're looking at how a material was manufactured, what went into it during that manufacturing process, how it behaves during its in-use phase. Some materials degrade and give off gases whilst they're in use. And also, what happens to that material at the end of its life? Can it be reused and kept in the loop? And finally, my reliable number 15 sweeper, the precautionary principle. If in real doubt, the responsible thing to do is leave a material out, especially if it's a high volume option, such as, say, the flooring in a 1,000-unit residential building. So those three things combined ensure that the materials going into a building shouldn't be having undue damage on the planet or on our own health. Buildings, just like the materials that go into them, actually have a life cycle of their own, from planning to design, construction, the in-use phase, and eventual demolition. Although, an interesting fact, if you adopt a 100-year or even a 1,000-year mindset for phases 1, 2, and 3, so planning, design, and construction, you can effectively delay demolition of that building indefinitely. That's better for us, it's better for the planet because there's less carbon impact, and ultimately the project team stand a chance of making it into Wikipedia one day. So that in-use phase can really be stretched out for quite a serious, substantial period of time, which means I've got a zero in there, and for me, that's about indoor air quality in the in-use phase. Even before COVID hit, we knew that we needed to be upgrading the ventilation systems with the latest filtration systems that allow us to capture the smallest airborne particles and those VOCs. We also needed to be installing indoor air quality monitors to help us see the indoor air and identify issues as they happen in real time, rather than after the fact itself. So if I combine an indoor air quality policy with a healthy materials policy, it should get me somewhere close to green, healthy indoor air. Maybe not as good as self-isolating in a forest, living up a tree, but it's an urban problem, and I present an urban solution. Something interesting happens too when we start prioritizing non-toxic natural materials like stone, wood, clay, lime plaster, and others. It starts to bring an organic aesthetic back into our buildings at the very time when we're increasingly disconnected from the natural world around us. And Biophilia is a recent initiative by architects and designers who have started to rekindle that connection with the outside world, bringing elements of nature back into our built environment in what equates to an aesthetic hybrid, a crossbreed of indoor and outdoor spaces. I see biophilic design as something of a butterfly emerging from its cocoon in design terms. It's been right there all along, just seemingly waiting for the moment to emerge, and it's definitely having a moment now. We're filling our indoor environments with lots of plants, vertical gardens, and hydroponics. But we're also using natural colors, textures, shapes, natural sounds, scents, and even lighting that replicates the natural ebb and flow of sunlight during the day. In one of two research studies I worked on with a research team from the University of Essex, over 100 respondents spent between 30 and 60 mindful minutes in a biophilic space full of nature. Of those respondents, we saw that 74% of them felt an improvement in mood, 84% of them felt more productive after that time, and 87% felt a reduction in perceived levels of stress and anxiety. So what's going on? Well, a space that's loaded with vitamin nature like that can effectively provide enough sensory continuity with the outside world to recreate and trigger some of the same benefits of our brain on actual nature, at least until we have time to get outside, go for a jog by the river, or walk in a park. Which is where the tale takes another twist. Because if we combine the mental health benefits of full immersion in nature with the physical benefits of exercise, we get something close to exercise squared. Green exercise is exercise outdoors. So what can I do with that? How can I leverage that insight? Well, if the students or staff at this medical university in Stockholm can't get outside in the lunch break for a walk or a jog because it's -10, biophilic design can give them a plan B. We took a 25 square meter space really an unused waiting area in an office area, and converted it into a green micro gym. We use natural materials, added in some functional training equipment, and they offer small group training sessions for staff and students. So why would one of the world's leading medical universities ask me to do that? They know, perhaps better than some, or many, that the right dose of exercise has been proven to enhance productivity and concentration. It improves your mood and self-esteem, and also reduces stress and anxiety. Therefore, providing opportunities for exercise has indirect benefits, in that case, for the university or employer. But I'm actually not here to sell you on exercise, honestly. From an ancient history perspective, inertia is actually the norm. We're not here to waste energy unnecessarily. Based on UK averages, that means about 85% of you in this space, the non-regular exercises, are officially off the hook. There is a catch, however, as you may have guessed. Historically, to get to our minimum calorie intake on any given day meant some form of movement, whether it be hunting or gathering. You just couldn't pick the two apart. It was industrialization and then, well, rather agriculture and then industrialization that broke that bond indefinitely, unleashing untold quantities of readily available and fairly cheap calories for our ready consumption. It's a problem because previously we had around 10,000 generations to adapt to a Paleolithic environment. We've only had 10 to 15 since industrialization. It's what's known as a mismatch of modernity. And we're now in the midst of a lifestyle disease epidemic with millions of lives lost every year to type 2 diabetes, obesity, and heart disease. So what can I do with the buildings that I work with to help? Well, when it comes to inactivity, it's not actually just sitting that is the culprit. It's movement or lack thereof. Movement really matters. Some is better than none, and going from an entirely sedentary lifestyle to just 60 minutes of exercise per week has a tangible impact on mortality rates. Active design strategies facilitate tiny movement snacks during the day. It's about low-level activity that cumulatively add up to make a real difference. So if I'm working on an office project, a workplace, I'm using environmental design nudges that can facilitate the development of healthy habits. A sit-stand desk, for example, can be a lifesaver for someone with lower back issues. I can also create standing room-only meeting areas for short brainstorming sessions. I'm creating different spaces within the office environment, encouraging movement between them, each one perhaps more of a focus on concentration or collaboration. But the really interesting part, perhaps, beyond any physical benefits that may be at play here, is that full autonomy remains with the end user. There are no sticks, only carrots. So what we're looking at is the mental game, the inner resilience being built, micro-decision by micro-decision, brick by brick by brick. So when no one's watching, what choices do you make? It's not just about hitting the lift button or using the stairs. There is some wider metaphor for life hidden in there somewhere, I'm sure. However, if you let me loose on a stairwell, we can use active design strategies to completely change the atmosphere. You know, they're typically neglected spaces that no one really wants to use, hidden behind a heavy door that looks like an alarm will go off if you touch it. But in something like a student accommodation building, we can integrate bright colors, wall murals, LED lighting, a sound system, perhaps a curated playlist, if they'll let me. Whatever it takes to make the stairwells a frequently used feature of the building, not just an emergency escape. Although, clearly, we do have to follow building code, health and regulations, etc. If you've got an underutilized space, like a basement or a corridor, we can create something called an active travel facility. Secure storage for bicycles, folding bikes, e-mobility solutions, have a charging station in there, perhaps a changing room and a shower. It's about promoting and facilitating more green, healthy movement between home and work, or home and university, for example. It's good for us, it's good for the planet, and ultimately good for the business or entity that made it happen. An unused space in an office environment can be converted into what's called a recharge room or a quiet room, ideal for difficult one-on-one conversations, a moment of strategic rest during the workday, or simply a Zen 5 minutes when you just need to get away from the outside world. And if we load that up with healthy materials, biophilic design, some aromatherapy, nature sounds on the sound system, we can start to create a 360-degree experience that's really quite powerful. So when we combine all of those elements, a healthy materials policy, an indoor air quality plan and procedures, biophilic design, active design strategies, and restorative spaces, as I see it, they're all evolution-friendly design adaptations for modern buildings. So when I think about what I do from a deep time perspective of ancestors, past, present, and future, creating green, healthy places starts to feel like something of a family business. It's really just a matter of perspective. And thankfully, having a transcendent life goal like this has given me real meaning and purpose going into what's probably the second half of my life, at least until I finally answer the call of the wild, settle down, find a mate, and pass on some of those stair-loving genes. Because remember, it really is just 3 acts: life, death, and the stories of our ancestors. This show will go on with or without us, no matter how central we think we may be to the plot. Both I and the real estate industry, therefore, simply have to make this the performance of a lifetime. Thank you.